When I first saw the shack, it looked like the kind of place raccoons went to retire. The roof sagged in the middle, shingles curled up like old potato chips, and the porch was sinking into the earth with every heavy sigh of wind. The place smelled like fish, mildew, and disappointment. For sale. Sign out front was so faded it looked like it was whispering its last words. $5, the listing said, not 5,000, not 505. I thought it was a typo until the agent confirmed it with a shrug and a smirk. Honestly, you're doing the county a favor by taking it, he said, nudging a pebble with his shoe. No one's touched it in 20 years. The last owner just stopped paying taxes. He didn't need to tell me that. The lake house looked abandoned by both man and Mercy. Still, I could see the bones. Behind the rot, beneath the grime, there was something strong, a foundation built before Lakeview Estates became a gated paradise for the rich and restless. And most importantly, this shack had water rights, the kind that let you build a dock and launch boats without HOA approval. The kind of rights that couldn't be created anymore. I signed the papers that afternoon. When the news got around, the HOA board practically threw a party at my expense. The president, Marlene Pierce, was the first to make her opinion known. She was the type of woman who ironed her napkins and smiled only when there was gossip to spread. She lived 3 houses up the hill in a mansion with marble columns that looked like they were stolen from a courthouse. $5. She said when I introduced myself at the next community meeting. Oh, bless your heart. She put her hand over her chest like she was saying a prayer. That's quite the fixer-upper, isn't it? The rest of the board chuckled politely, their laughter dripping with superiority. I could almost hear the word, eyesore, bouncing around in their heads. The HOA started sending letters the next week. My mailbox filled up with neatly folded sheets printed on thick paper, each one pointing out a new violation. One said my shack did not align with the community aesthetic. Another claimed the odor of decay might diminish property values. My favorite came with a photo of my dock, half submerged, covered in algae, and the note, unacceptable condition. Please remove this structure immediately. I framed that one. Every night after work, I drove down to the lake and worked by lantern light. I patched the roof, replaced planks, and fought off a small army of spiders. The floor creaked like an old man's knees, but little by little, the place started to breathe again. I scrubbed the mold off the walls until my hands bled. I hauled new boards up from my truck, one at a time, while Marlene and her friends sipped wine on their balconies, whispering about the man with the junkyard shack. I learned to ignore them. There was a piece to the work, a rhythm that made me forget everything else. The lake was still at night, the moonlight spilling across the surface like silver oil. Loons called in the distance, their cries haunting but beautiful. It was the kind of silence that made you think about where you'd been and where you wanted to go. I wasn't rich, not even close, but that shack became mine in a way no mansion ever could be. Sometimes I'd catch Marlene walking her poodle past my place, pretending to inspect the shoreline. She'd wrinkle her nose at the smell of fresh paint and mutter something about community standards. I'd just smile and wave, covered in sawdust. 3 years went by like that. Every spare dollar I had went into the shack. I replaced the dock, installed solar panels, even dug out an old stone fireplace I found buried behind a wall. I turned that wreck into something special. Not fancy, but strong and honest. A place that didn't need approval from anyone. Then the world changed. A new tech company announced it was building a wellness campus 2 miles from the lake, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of Lakeview Estates. Investors started buying homes left and right. Helicopters buzzed overhead, surveying land. Property values skyrocketed overnight, and my 5 shack, it was sitting on the only property with independent lake access. The last piece of land not under HOA control. That little clause in my deed, the one everyone had ignored, suddenly made my lot the most valuable piece of real estate in the county. When the first offer came in, I thought it was a scam. $500,000 cash. Then another offer came, $1 million. Then 2. Every time I checked my email, there was another proposal, another number that didn't seem real. That's when the HOA stopped laughing. Marlene showed up at my door one morning, all smiles and perfume, holding a tray of cookies. I just wanted to welcome you properly, she said, stepping onto my porch without waiting for an invitation. We've been talking, and we think it might be best, for everyone, if we consolidate lake access under the association, for safety and consistency. I leaned against the doorway. Consistency. Yes, she said sweetly. Would be happy to purchase your property at a generous rate. Say what you paid plus a little something for your time. $6, I said. Her smile twitched. "We can discuss the specifics." I told her I'd think about it. That night, I sat out on my dock and watched the lights from the mansions across the water ripple across the lake. The air smelled of pine and distant barbecue. I thought about the people who'd laughed when I bought the place, who'd written me off as a fool. I thought about all those nights alone, hammering boards under a flickering lantern. They saw a shack. I saw freedom. Over the next few months, I turned down every offer. I wasn't ready to sell. The more they wanted it, the more I realized what it was worth, not just in dollars, but in principle. Still, the letters started again. Now the HOA claimed my dock violated updated shoreline regulations. They said my solar panels disrupted neighborhood uniformity. They even fined me for having an unauthorized structure when I added a small shed for tools. Every attempt was the same: pressure me to sell, to fold, to disappear. But I didn't. Instead, I hired a lawyer and had every inch of my deed verified, recorded, and notarized. I made sure the title was airtight. I paid off every tax, every fee, every possible loophole they could use. By the end of the year, Lakeview Estates was a battlefield of quiet hostility. I could feel their resentment in every wave of polite conversation. The woman they once mocked at the meetings now avoided my eyes. Marlene still smiled when she passed me, but her smile had the stiffness of someone chewing glass. The funny thing about value is how fast it changes, how a $5 shack becomes a $5 million prize just because other people suddenly want it. But the real satisfaction wasn't in the number. It was in knowing I'd seen something they couldn't. I'd looked past the mold, the laughter, and the pity, and found something that couldn't be bought or bullied. That shack had given me something no HOA could regulate: peace, independence, and a story they'd never lived down. And when the day came that they tried to steal it, I was more than ready. The night of the HOA meeting, the lake was unusually still. The air carried that heavy, expectant quiet that comes before a storm, not the kind that rattles windows, but the kind that changes everything afterward. The clubhouse where the HOA held its meetings was the fanciest building in Lakeview Estates: polished floors, chandeliers, and a wall of windows that looked out over the water. I'd been there a few times before, always as a quiet observer, the one they'd politely nod to but never really acknowledge. Tonight, though, the air felt different. When I walked in, every head turned. The usual murmur of pre-meeting chatter died off as I took my seat at the back. Marlene Pierce stood near the podium, her hair immaculate, her pearls gleaming under the recessed lighting. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile that welcomed anyone. It was sharp, rehearsed, and a little too pleased with itself. "Good evening, everyone," she began, tapping her papers into a neat stack. "Thank you for attending this special session of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association." Her voice carried that syrupy tone she used when she was about to do something underhanded, but wanted it to sound like a favor. She talked for a while about landscaping budgets and road maintenance. Small talk to lull everyone into comfort. I watched from my seat, calm but alert. I already knew what was coming. Word had spread. A neighbor who didn't like Marlene as much as he pretended to had tipped me off that something big was going to be voted on tonight. Something about my property. Finally, Marlene cleared her throat and straightened her papers. "Now, the last item on tonight's agenda is one of particular importance to the community as a whole." She smiled wider, looking around the room like a queen preparing to make a benevolent decree. "After a detailed review of our founding documents, we've discovered a bylaw discrepancy, one that affects the boundaries and ownership rights of pre-1972 structures on the lake." There it was. A murmur rippled through the room. Marlene continued, her words honeyed and deliberate. "As it turns out, properties built before the establishment of the Lakeview Estates Association technically fall under communal lake access guidelines. That means, legally speaking, such lots may be considered part of the association's shared amenities." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Her gaze slid toward me for the briefest second before she turned back to her audience. "For the good of the community, and to prevent any misuse or inequitable advantage, we propose a motion to formally acquire and integrate the Lake Shack property currently held by Mr. Keller, at assessed tax value, of course. It's only fair that all residents enjoy equal access." There was a wave of approving nods, the kind that come easily when people think they're protecting their investments. A few voices muttered agreement. "Makes sense. Who's had special treatment. It's only fair." I let them talk for a minute, just long enough for the illusion to settle in. Then I stood up. "Marlene," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, "you make it sound so generous. But before you start planning your new communal dock, maybe we should take a look at some facts. Dozens of faces turned toward me. Some curious, some nervous, some annoyed that the evening was about to get messy. I walked down the aisle slowly, carrying a worn leather folder. The click of my boots echoed off the polished floor. Marlene's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Mr. Keller?" she said smoothly. "This isn't a personal matter. It's a community issue." "Oh, it's very personal," I interrupted. "You're trying to take my land." A low murmur rolled through the room. Marlene's tone sharpened. "We're simply correcting a legal oversight. Nothing more." I laid the folder on the podium beside her neatly stacked papers. "Then you won't mind if we check your oversight against the original records." I opened the folder and pulled out a yellowed copy of the 1972 charter, stamped and signed by the county registrar. "Has your original bylaw. It did mention communal property for pre-association structures, just like you said. But you missed something." I flipped to another document, this one dated 1983. This amendment, filed, ratified, and signed by then-President Marlene Pierce, officially repealed that clause. The HOA relinquished all claim to independently owned properties, probably because the county told you it was unconstitutional to seize private land. The room went dead silent. Marlene's smile froze in place. That's absurd. I've never seen that document." "Oh, I'm sure you haven't," I said, flipping open my laptop. "Luckily I have, and so does the county clerk's office. I requested certified copies last week." I turned the screen toward the audience. On it, a scanned document appeared, complete with signatures and timestamps. The HOA seal was right there at the bottom. Marlene's name neatly printed under it. Someone in the back laughed quietly. Another person whispered, "Is that real?" I wasn't done. "Now, let's talk about those inequitable advantages you mentioned," I said. I clicked to the next file, a video feed from a drone I'd flown over the lake earlier that month. The footage showed my rebuilt dock stretching elegantly over the water, sturdy and clean, with the sun setting behind it. Then the camera panned to a sleek new sign I'd installed at the ND, private access, authorized leaseholders only. I looked around the room, making sure every face saw it. "That dock you're trying to acquire is currently leased to a luxury wellness resort for 500 $1,000 a year. They'll be offering lake retreats, kayaking programs, and eco-tours, all booked through me. Every permit, every license, approved by the county, not the HOA." The silence in that room could have broken glass. Finally, one of the board members, a man who'd once called my place an embarrassment to the neighborhood, cleared his throat. "500,000 per year." I nodded. "And growing. The resort's expanding next summer." Marlene's voice trembled slightly now, though she tried to steady it. "Mr. Keller, this isn't appropriate material for a community meeting." "What's inappropriate?" I said. "Is you trying to bully someone out of their property because you suddenly realized it's worth something? You laughed when I bought it. You fined me, mocked me, and wrote me letters about aesthetic disharmony. And now that I've turned it into something valuable, you think you can rewrite history." I paused, looking around the room. "You can't." A few people shifted in their seats. Others avoided eye contact. I could see it, the shift, the cracks in the facade. The same neighbors who'd once smirked at me were now calculating what this meant for them. If the HOA could try to take mine, what stopped them from doing it to others? Marlene tried one last time to regain control. "We're simply ensuring community integrity," she said tightly. "No," I replied. "You're ensuring your greed doesn't get left behind." I gathered my papers and laptop, slid them back into my folder, and walked toward the door. But before I left, I turned back to face her. "Oh, and Marlene, don't worry about losing access to the lake. The resort's agreed to offer discounted day passes for HOA members." I smiled. 50% off after 4 p.m. The room erupted. Some people laughed outright, others clapped, and a few just stared at her in stunned silence. I didn't wait to see her reaction. I walked out into the cool night air, the sound of the lake lapping softly against the shore. As I stood there, I could see my shack, no, my home. Across the water, its lights reflecting in gentle ripples. The same place they once mocked was now the jewel they all wanted. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills you up with something steady and real. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or board meetings. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the echo of laughter turned to silence, in the calm certainty that you were right all along. And as the clubhouse lights dimmed behind me, I smiled, not because I'd won, but because they'd finally learned the one lesson money never teaches. You can't steal what someone earned by believing in it when no one else did.